Today, the Kuomintang represents one of a number of parties vying for power in Taiwan's democratic system, though it is a major party, one of the big two. But it had not always been like this. For a long period of time, the Kuomintang ruled Taiwan with an iron fist. Before their final retreat to Taiwan, but after its handover from the Japanese to the Chinese, the crowd broke out around the government's confiscation of contraband cigarettes and the subsequent accidental shooting of a civilian. Riots broke out across the island in and out of Taipei, with people demanding greater autonomy, free elections, and an end to government corruption. The usual. The nationalist government ruling the island at the time under Governor Chen Yi called upon Chiang Kai-shek for help. Chiang in turn brought troops from the mainland to crack down on the protests. To be fair, it appears to be unclear what exactly the Generalissimo was told when the request for troops came into his desk. He was fully engaged trying to fight off the communists on the mainland, and he can barely spare the troops for it. There are spurious reports of him telling Chen to basically kill them all, but this comes via a secondary source without solid proof. Regardless of whose blame it was, in the end, an undetermined number of people were killed in the brutal crackdown that followed, with estimates ranging from the hundreds to the thousands. Chen Yi would later be reassigned back to the mainland, but was convicted of spying for the communists and executed in Taipei. The Communist Party regards him as a hero, but on Taiwan, his legacy is a little more mixed, possibly due to the fact that he didn't really like the Taiwanese at all, and also that 228 incident, which killed thousands of people. The 228 incident, as it is now called, remains a politically sensitive topic on the island today. Thus, after coming to Taiwan with memories of the 228 incident and its loss of the Chinese mainland clear in its mind, the Kuomintang knew that it was not particularly popular with the local population. More troublingly, the crackdown on 228 protesters had uncovered some sleeper Communist Party cells. This especially alarmed the Kuomintang High Command because the Communist Party had successfully taken root in the lower peasant classes of the Hainan community. Their collaboration, infiltration, and espionage played a big role in the fall of one of the Kuomintang's final strongholds. While 50 years of Japanese colonization made such infiltration somewhat less likely on Taiwan Island, the existence of communist sleeper cells clearly made it possible, and the Kuomintang wanted to make sure that it could not and will not happen again. They began closely studying the factors and ideas that led to its popularity and ousting by the Chinese people on the mainland. Chiang Kai-shek's study led to him deciding that the structure of the Kuomintang Party impeded its ability to respond to the people's needs. Previously, he had resisted such reform because doing so could possibly displace him as the center of power within the party. Coming to Taiwan, this was no longer an issue. Chiang was the Generalissimo. Thus, they needed to overhaul how the party fundamentally worked. They turned, of course, to the side who beat them for inspiration. Inspired by the Leninist Chinese Communist Party, the Kuomintang extended its tentacles into virtually every aspect of Taiwanese society. From the grassroots level to the highest ranks of governance, the Kuomintang involved itself in Taiwanese society in order to firmly establish its grip on power and remake Taiwan in China's image. These efforts are backed through secret police forces prosecution and imprisonment of some 140,000 Taiwanese. This period of suppression is broadly considered to have lasted from 1947 to 1987, though the majority of the executions appear to have happened during the first 2 decades of the period. Not that, politically motivated imprisonment is all that great itself. And the period of time is labeled the White Terror. This term was borrowed from the Russian Civil War, referring to the White Army made up of former Tsarist officers fighting against the Bolshevik Red Army. Judging strictly on terms of suppressing violent dissent, one could say that the Kuomintang's efforts succeeded. Over the span of 40 years, only one more major uprising occurred, the 1977 Kaohsiung incident. This lengthy period of authoritarian imposed peace makes you wonder what exactly made the Taiwanese White Terror so successful. The answer seems to be a multi-legged strategy of economic payoffs, cultural remaking through education and the resettling of peoples, backed with constant surveillance. The party secured a lasting hold on the reins of power by deeply involving itself with economic activity and disassembling the old systems of power. This began with extensive land reform, where the party would seize land at low cost from owners, usually those associated with the former Japanese colonizers, and redistribute it to tenants. This had 2 political benefits. First, it helped resettle a Chinese mainland refugee population of 2 million people across the entire Taiwan island. earning their loyalty and bringing Chinese cultures and practices to the Taiwanese households and people. The second was to eject native Taiwanese landowners from former positions of power and prevent any lower class discontent from coalescing around them. If you were a peasant and the party's changes made you angry, there was nowhere for you to go to express your desire for change. One should not also dismiss the economic benefits of land reform for the Kuomintang. In collecting the spread between the rents and the cost of acquisition, the Kuomintang gathered immense wealth. This in turn gave it the funds to keep comfortable the social classes that allow it to maintain power: educators, public servants, and the army. These people, mostly educated mainlander refugees, would help also instill Chinese cultural tenets back into a population that had started to drift during 50 years of Japanese colonial rule. Old Japanese and Taiwanese texts were destroyed, and new ones were written focusing on the idea of China and celebrating Chinese culture. A Taiwanese raised before the end of the White Terror told me that she would have to learn and memorize all the provinces of mainland China as part of their curriculum, despite never having visited the mainland before in her life. The Taiwanese language itself, as well as all other indigenous languages, were banned from use in public. Those caught by the language police would be issued a fine. TV programs all switched to the Mandarin language, and Taiwanese opera, which I've never personally seen before, was replaced with the Peking opera, which was a Chiang Kai-shek favorite. And then, as guarantor of the whole system, the Kuomintang held the right to imprison, torture, and occasionally execute its political opponents. It drew on the sedition law of the criminal code for this power. The party would conduct public executions on the banks of major rivers in Taiwanese cities, as well as midnight arrests and killings throughout the countryside. Though I haven't really actually found a lot of documents to kind of corroborate this. This is something I've read as more secondhand. The goal was to warn against any attempt to revolt against or even question the party's grip on power. I do want to emphasize something. When most people bring up the White Terror, the thing they most often bring up are the imprisonments, the surveillance, and the executions. Yes, it all happened. Yes, force and surveillance were a crucial part of the coercive mix, but it was not all there was to it. You have to consider the fact that the Kuomintang was attempting to govern and quote-unquote control a population of 9+ million, with only a minority of that population, the mainlanders who arrived with Chiang in 1949. Such a system could not work unless it had at least the tacit support of a class of native Taiwanese. And this tacit support appears to have come from the fact that the Kuomintang in Taiwan, much like the Chinese Communist Party on the mainland today, promised and delivered on economic growth. People got rich and prosperous. World War II had been a desperate time for everyone on the island. The Kuomintang's economic policies, headlined by its large infrastructure projects and free trade agreements with the West, helped deliver that. In the end, it was a remarkable system, and it reminds me of what Trevor Noah wrote about apartheid. It was a finely tuned system built with great thought, but like apartheid, it could not last. Times were changing. The 1970s and 80s had brought amazing economic growth, and that, along with excellent education, had created a rich and sophisticated middle class, increasingly aware of the world beyond their shores. Those people began to demand greater say in how their government was being run, challenging the Kuomintang to respond. The remarkable thing is that unlike the Chinese Communist Party, the Kuomintang did respond and gradually stepped down from power.